Eddie, we've just been chatting to Natasha Jonas and Terri Harper. They're just awesome people, aren't they? Awesome women, awesome people.
I remember when Katie Taylor first sent me, she slid into my DMs actually to ask me to promote her. And I thought to myself, I just don't think there's a market for women's boxing. And she said that in the message. She said, look, I know you're probably not sure about it, but look at my achievements, watch me fight. And if we could have a meeting, I would love that. And, I just want you to hear my thoughts. And out of respect for Katie Taylor, because of what she's achieved, I had that meeting. But when she flew in from Dublin with Brian Peters, I thought to myself, I'm just going to go through the process and then, and I met her and I was just absolutely mesmerized by the drive and passion of this individual, and within 10 minutes, I was like, I'm going to do this, and the more that people told me you can't do it, the more messages I got across social media saying, we don't like women's boxing, or they should be back in the kitchen, or who wants to watch that? The more it made me think, do you know what? I disagree, and I'm going to prove you wrong. What Katie has done has been incredible. I mean, she's the reason, when we talk about the growth of boxing in the UK, forget women's boxing. Yes, I can take some credit, but also a huge amount of credit has to go to Anthony Joshua, right? When we talk about women's boxing, yes, I can take a bit of the credit that I have, supported it, but the credit goes to Katie Taylor, Irish boxing, British boxing, world boxing. And without those flagship fighters, without those role models, without those greats, it just doesn't work. And what Katie has done is open the door of opportunity for all these other women. And by the way, people who have come before her, Cecilia Brackhouse, Jane Couch, who you were talking about on the call. They have set the standard, but they've motivated the next generation. When you talk to Terri Harper and she says, at 16, at 15, I packed it in because there was nowhere to go. There was the Olympics, but there was no pro game, there was no...
And she was working in a chip shop.
But this is, when you talk about, I'm a big believer in narrative, storylines, just feel-good factors. And when you start saying that this sport has enabled a young girl from Doncaster who worked in a chip shop to become a world champion, to buy a new house from the sport of boxing, to fill up arenas in Sheffield, to box here at Fight Camp, in front of millions of people around the world. And probably if she's victorious, to go to America and maybe unify in New York or Las Vegas.
She's also LGBT proud as well. There's that element. That's another narrative. It's another narrative that's very vogue at the moment, isn't it? She's got this really unusual looking partner, and the story of, she's the manager at the co-op and Terry stacking shelves for her over the pandemic or over Christmas to earn a bit of extra money. They sent me a package of photographs of, I did an interview for Telegraph Women's Sport with Terry, and they sent me a package from their holiday. They are so cool as a couple as well.
I know. And so refreshing.
Yeah.
And when I was just talking, I was going to say before we started, I believe the only way this sport can get to where I want it to be is via a single entity controlling the sport. And I've had a bit of support, bit of stick over the last couple of weeks where I said, I'm that guy. And that's my aim. And the only way I can make boxing up there with the Premier League, with NBA, with Major League Baseball, and back to those glory days, is to be that entity.
Are you the new Cartel then?
No, not Cartel.
I'm only joking. I'm just kidding.
I'm just the guy who, wants to take away the politics of the sport.
Yeah.
Just do what you should be doing, which is making the best be the best. I mean, just keep blowing smoke up Dana White. But how nice is it to be able, imagine being Dana White and you sit there and I know it's not just as easy as, right, you're fighting you, but it's not far away. Do you know what I mean? Where you can be able to be in a position where you know the fights you want to make. Like, I know the fights I want to make in boxing, but you can only make them 20% of the time. In women's boxing, I can make them 90% of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I look about that single, that singular entity, if you like, I think I can do that in women's boxing a lot quicker than I can in men's boxing.
That makes sense. Makes sense.
And I've proved that as well. Like, although Amanda Serrano pulled out the Katie Taylor fight, all of a sudden, 7 weeks to go, probably the biggest fight out there. Katie Taylor, will you fight Delphine Pursoon in a rematch? Yes. Pursoon, yes. Done. Terri Harper against Natasha Jonas, first defence, first all-British female fight, world title fight. Chantel Cameron, she's going to fight for the vacant world title or fight one of the champions. She would not turn down one fighter in the top 10 or one champion to face now. And that's so refreshing, Gareth. I can't tell you.
Yeah. So on the other side of that fight, Tasha Jonas, I think I first interviewed her in 2007 when the women's boxing was announced in the Olympics. And I went to see Katie in Ireland as well and spent 2 nights with her and her dad. And amazingly, it's not my narrative, but those two meet in the semi-final. Tasha is an extraordinarily beautiful person, like inside and out. She's the calmest person I think I've ever met. She's totally unflappable. I think it's brilliant that you've got her back because she was going to leave. A couple of times she's thought about leaving, and she was a talented footballer. She's a special person as well. And I think she's well capable of causing an upset here on the night against Terri.
Oh, I agree.
She's so experienced. People forget it. She's so experienced.
So driven as well. Yeah. I think that I was speaking to Dave Coldwell the other night about Jordan Gill. He went out and he was like this whiz kid, and he was coming out to Michael Jackson Thriller, and he was moonwalking to the ring, and all of a sudden he got beat in Nottingham by a Mexican fighter that actually wasn't supposed to lose to. And then he got a virus, and then his world come crashing down. Now Dave Coldwell's saying, you know what, I see a different kid in the gym. A smarter kid, a more driven kid, a more determined kid. And that came by the loss. And I think that's done the same thing to Natasha Jonas. I think the loss that she experienced, and she got stopped, she got badly beaten that night. And it was always my plan when I signed Natasha Jonas to make Katie Taylor against Natasha Jonas for the world title. And when she lost that night, it was almost like head in hands. It's like, oh, that was the fight that I felt that could have really turned women's boxing over, a major Saturday night headline fight, if we're ever going to be able to headline with women's boxing. And now we get to a stage of Katie Taylor headlined, in Manchester recently. Cecilia Brackhouse is headlining an undisputed fight with Jessica McCaskill in America. Terri Harper's headlining against Natasha Jonas. And Natasha was right what she said about the UFC. It was fine for Holly Holm. It was fine for Amanda Nunes to headline. So why shouldn't these kind of fights that are so entertaining and so skilled be headlining as well? And I'm proud to do it. And I think Natasha Jonas is a really live underdog. I mean, maybe she shouldn't even be an underdog. It's only the recent form of Terri Harper, but we don't know a lot about Terri Harper other than she looks really good. She might unfold against a clever, tricky southpaw with a game plan from Joe Gallagher. And sometimes you get carried away, with all this momentum. Wow, Terri Harper's great. You heard her talking on the call about unification fights and, this kind of stuff. So, whoa. This is your toughest fight of your career by a long way. So you better switch on for this. But I do get the feeling that Terri Harper is a special talent.
Obviously, you're looking ahead now to, you've got a week, and then you're really busy for a month. You could be the busiest month of your life, your working life, because there's going to be all kinds of things going on. I know you're at home doing it at HQ.
Well, no, I'll be in the hotel. I mean, I'm at...
Yeah, exactly. You're in the bubble. Yeah. Obviously, Ted Cheeseman and Sam Eggington, we spoke to them with you earlier this week. They're both really up for this. They're going to put on a real war. You could just feel it. Ted Cheeseman in a brilliant place mentally after a few little collapses last year, and he's a lovely fella. You wouldn't think he was 23 either, would you? Do you know what I mean?
He's 23, is he 23, 24? Sam Eggington's 25, 26.
Yeah.
And you think about the fights they've been in.
They've been around forever.
No, Gareth, when you talk about narratives and storytelling, the way that you grow a fighter, the way that you grow a profile of a fighter is to create that storyline, or not even create it, just expose that storyline to people like you guys. And you look at it and go, wow, what a great story. When you talk about Ted Cheeseman's recovery as a gambling addict, you know, and into rehab, and the fact that I can't tell you, like, I'm not, you know, I don't speak to Ted Cheeseman every day. I go to the gym in Brentwood, I see him, you know, he comes in here, he's very close to Tony Sims. No one around him knew of those problems.
Can we just clarify what it is? Because I went to the gym and went to see Conor Benn and Nigel Benn like last year. I went to do an interview with them for Talk Sport, I think it was, or it was the Telegraph. And Tony said to me, "You wouldn't believe about fucking Ted. You wouldn't believe about Ted. He only put his whole purse,
everything,
his whole purse on a bet, and he's just about to have a child, or he's just had a child. That is a serious problem. We know Ted's lovely,
but it was only after the Sergio. Yeah, it was only after the Sergio Garcia fight at the O2 when he lost on points, and he boxed
with his and he just used his head, didn't he?
Yeah, he was terrible that night, and no one could really make out what, you know. He came back in the changing room.
He was letting himself get hit. It was weird to watch, wasn't it?
And then he came back in the change room and he just broke down to Tony, and he just blurted it all out, and it was like, I can't believe it. You know, we almost felt like, yeah, it's hard to say we've let him down, but it was.
Did you want to pay him again? Did you want to pay him again? Did you want to pay him again?
No, you know, Tony then said, I'm going to, you know, look, you never, especially at that age, you know, a young fighter, he was making good money, he was headlining the O2, but now, you know, Tony will probably have something in place where there's just, or particularly in the early days when he was recovering, say, look, I'll hold this, you know, we'll pay you here and here.
Money.
Probably. But, you know, he went, there's some really good people, not just Tony Sims, but people around Tony Sims down at that gym who funded Ted in the Tony Adams clinic, you know, and he went there on, you know, you got, people can set this up for you, but you got to want to do it. He went there off his own accord. And you know what? I think when he came out, I think some people feel like these problems are solved quicker than they actually are, you know, and I think after a couple of months, he sort of said to himself, yeah, I'm fine now. I'm clean. You know, I don't need to gamble anymore. And he didn't, but he still had many demons. Then he boxed Kieran Conway. He was unlucky that night. He should have won that fight. Then he went and boxed Scott Fitzgerald. I thought he boxed fantastically against Scott.
I thought he won it by a round.
Yeah, a lot of people did, you know, and I think that was like a real kick in the nuts for him, because he's thinking, do you know what? I felt like I beat Kieran Conway. They gave me a draw. Now I feel like I beat Ted Cheeseman. Scott Fitzgerald, and I've lost. What a year this has been for me. And I think
and
now,
he became a father.
Of course, but I think now that period in his life is behind him.
Yeah.
You know, and I think he's been able to actually park that to the side. And when we talked about Jordan Gill going through those defeats, you know, you imagine if those three fights in that episode of Sergio Garcia, Kieran Conway, and Scott Fitzgerald had been three journeymen. Do you think Ted Cheeseman would be as good a fighter as he is now? No way. You know, the experience he has now, the pain that he suffered in and out of the ring, has matured him as a young man. He's very mature now, Ted. You know, when you talk to him, as like you say, as a 23-year-old, he doesn't strike me as a 23-year-old. He strikes me as a 40-year-old. You know, who's got his wife and kids and all that kind of stuff. So I just think that we may really see another level to Ted Cheeseman. And I think Sam Eggington has also got the bit between his teeth. He got beaten convincingly by Liam Smith. You know what? And it's great when you talk to a fighter, not deluded, just turns around and says, oh, he was much better than me. You know, I'm not actually at that level. Liam Smith's a world-class fighter. And guess what? I'm not. I'm a British, European level fighter, maybe fringe world level if I get it right on the night. But Sam Eggington has, I mean, when you talk about stories, Sam Eggington worked on a building site. My dad met him through Prize Fighter, and he just said, I love this kid. You know, this guy has earned hundreds of thousands of pounds. He owns his house there. He's got a lovely house, lovely family. And boxing for him is about snakes and ladders.
Yeah.
It's about winning, going up the board. Oh, you lose, you come down the ladder. Oh, you win again. You know, you go up the ladder. And with him, the victory in Italy, where he went and stopped, you know, top 10 fighter in the world in Field di Gilli, has put him right back in the mix. But this fight is really epitomizes what Fight Camp and hopefully the new era of boxing is all about, which is the fight doesn't really make sense for either of you. But everybody wants to see it. And the opportunity is there for you to get paid. And by the way, if you're good enough, if you win, you move up that ladder and up that board. And if you don't, you will get another opportunity, but you might get less money, might be a tougher fight. But that's where I want to get to with the sport, because so many times I've been guilty of it as well, but managers have been extremely guilty of it. They don't want to take risks. And by the way, that's their job. You know, you wouldn't be a very good manager if you just wanted to take the most amount of risks for your fighter for, you know, what might not be your perception of the right money. But I have a responsibility. When I make a poor fight, it's on me. You know, the broadcasters, the fans, I get it in the neck. So I never want to make a poor fight.
The last poor one was Chamberlain and
yeah, but you know what, Gareth? That sold 9,000 tickets.
I know,
and it was East London v South London. It should have been, you know, but that played out on paper. But I'm not even talking about fights that look good on paper and don't play out to be good fights. I've made fights that are poor on paper, poor in real life.
Right.
And what Fight Camp has showed me is actually, even if it's not Anthony Joshua, you know, there are fights, British title fights, European title fights, domestic fights, that if they're high quality, if they're exciting, then the content's good and it's going to be good for the sport. And I think that's what you're seeing in Fight Camp, particularly in week one. You know, we go live next Saturday, the 1st of August. It's a brilliant card. And sometimes you put something on paper that you look at and you go, wow, and it doesn't materialise. And I think if it does, the momentum that we're going to have is going to be fantastic. And I really feel like this period that we've suffered for the last couple of months could end up changing the sport. We've got to be harder with the fighters, and we've got to be harder with the managers particularly. And we may, you know, you may see me letting fighters go. You know, you may see me not extending contracts. I have to have that line. You know, we've got to make sure that you're well treated, you get what you deserve, but we just can't afford in this environment to put bad fights on or pay you a load of money for a poor fight.
So August the 1st, as you say, then Ted Cheeseman, Eggington, Jordan Gill, loads of brilliant young fighters, really competitive fights. Then you go to the Friday, don't you, I think?
Yeah,
Friday. Terri Harper defending a WBC super featherweight title against Natasha Jonas, another great card. Then the following Saturday, isn't it?
Friday the 14th, again with Felix Cash against Wellborn, Zelfa Barrett, Shannon Courtenay on that card.
And then
the night after, we're actually in Tulsa in America for our first.
You can't be at both, can you?
No, unfortunately not.
But then the week after the pay-per-view, and hopefully we'll all be on the lawn that night because we'll be.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I'd like to make sure.
I mean, the media there to.
Yes.
Like Sasha Povetkin, he must be coming into the country fairly soon.
He is. He's coming in to a 14-day quarantine, which, you know, I guess it's not ideal, but the setup we have at the hotel there is, you know, we've built our own gym to make sure the fighters can train there. So it is what it is. But Dillian Whyte as well, you know, he's in Portugal, so he may have to come and quarantine for 14 days.
He looks in terrific shape, you know.
Really good shape. I mean, don't forget, blimey.
He says he's going to have 3 fights in lockdown. He doesn't care.
He's been in camp since end of Feb.
10 months.
10 weeks. I mean,
10 weeks.
He looked fantastic. This is a dangerous fight against Alexander Povetkin. You know, everybody's talking about the mandatory, Fury, the WBC situation. Povetkin is so dangerous. He can
battle of the left hooks.
100%.
Battle of the left hooks.
And I wouldn't like to trade up with either of them.
No.
But, you know, I think this is such a pivotal moment for Dillian Whyte's career. And by the way, I really have to take my hat off to him. The fact that he's willing to take risks like this in this kind of environment of fight camp, because this is different. You know, don't forget.
Example, Eddie, for the other heavyweights, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, it is. But what he's saying, you know, he come out and said, listen, if you've got to take a little bit less money, if you've got a box behind closed doors, get on with it. That's what we do. I'm a fighter. The fans love Dillian Whyte because he's just that. You know, look at his resume. He's never sat there as #1 challenger, a mandatory challenger, and just said, oh, I'll just have a couple of 10-rounders. You know, he boxed Chisora, he boxed Helenius, he boxed Joseph Parker, beat him. He boxed Oscar Rivas, beat him. He boxed Chisora again, boxed Marius Wack. Now he's boxing Alexander Povetkin. Like, it's a hell of a run. And it's a really dangerous fight. Listen, as is the undisputed lightweight championship between Katie Taylor and Delphine Persoon. I mean, that is, the first fight was one of the best fights I've ever seen. The atmosphere in Madison Square Garden. And I was emotional that night thinking about where women's boxing has come. Look at this. 20,000 people at the Garden on their feet for this. You know, in a fight that was very close. Some people felt Delphine Persoon won that fight. And ever since that night, it's just been in Katie's mind, I have to fight this girl again. Yeah. You know, I have to.
Final thing, I spoke to you earlier about it this week, and I think I got the right end of the stick, that you're plotting and planning to continue these events through the year, but you're also looking at the O2 Arena already for November and October and November for Derek Chisora, respectively, Derek Chisora and Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev. Potentially at the moment, with crowds of 2,000 to get crowds in. I don't know if I got the wrong end of the stick with that, but that's
you ran with that headline the other day, Gareth. You know, it's not unusual for you to run with a headline that might not be true. But but what I said was, and it's right in some respect, is that we may be limited to the numbers we can have in an arena. That might be 2,000. And what we would need to do is create some kind of environment, some kind of seating where those premium seats would be a lot more expensive than they would be if you were in the top tier of a normal Anthony Joshua fight. Because you know, the Kubrat Pulev against AJ could generate, I don't know, 5 million quid on the gate. So if all of a sudden there's no gate, it's quite a big hole in the budget. So what do? You know, do we reduce purses? Do we, you know, have a smaller environment and the seating prices are a little bit more expensive? I'm hoping that by the end of November, December, we can do the 17,000 in the O2. Unlikely, but we've started that process with World Snooker, which is our event, and we had that as a government test event. Now we're exploring plans to get, you know, 200, 500, 1,000 into the O2, into York Hall in September, probably for Joshua Buatsi. And then as we go into October, back to Cardiff and Newcastle, we hope that things start to move. But the only way you're going to get it is if you start pressing it. You know, you can't just wait for everything to happen.
You've got to trial it, because you've got 350 at the Crucible. Your dad's got 350 at the Crucible, hasn't he?
Exactly.
In terms of spectators,
now, but we've worked hard on that. That's months of work to show people the seating plans, the exit rows, you know, track and trace, you know, everything that keeps the local council happy, everything that keeps the government happy. But now we have that relationship with them. The next step now is say, okay, well, that's subject to that working well in August. We also have a boxing event in September. This is the seating plan. This is the strategy of how this one would work. Do you approve that? And the answer will be yes, subject to the test events going well. You know, but then we go 500, 1,000, 2,000. And like I said, for AJ, we might only be allowed 2,000. Touch wood, we'll have the whole arena. But interesting times, my friend.
Absolutely. Listen, great to speak to you as always. Great. Good luck with all that's going on in the next week, and we look forward to seeing these fantastic fights.
Cheers, Gareth. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate.